This is the flashlight redesign by Umar Ahmed. So the initial constraint we were presented with when we first got the flashlight was that we needed redesign the flashlight with functionality in mind. We wanted to corner the market where functionality is key. Upon first look at our flashlight, we noticed that there were two modes on it. There was a battery powered mode in which you would just flip a switch and the light would turn on based on battery power, and a crank powered mode in which you would crank one-handed crank, and its mechanical energy would produce the electricity powering the flashlight. We also noticed that it had a slot profile, and what that means is that when the actual shape of the flashlight was based on slot geometry rather than say this circle geometry. Like a normal tubular flashlight, it was kind of slightly elongated, kind of more like an oval shape. We also noticed that it had feet for stability at the bottom of it, and what that did was basically when we set it down anywhere, it wouldn't roll away or anything like that. We also noticed that there were two separate light bulbs rather than one big one, and these two separate light bulbs we noticed were actually slightly weaker than, say, one actually strong one. And last thing we noticed was there was a lanyard loop, or just a lanyard spot. And what that did was it allowed accessing the flashlight to be really easy. Say it was in your pocket, you could just grab that lanyard loop and pull it out. And yeah, it would just be really easy to access. For our research into our redesign, we first started with the customer action flowchart, which looks something like this. The customer would pick up the flashlight and flip either tab, whichever mode of power they wanted, and based on that, your user experience would kind of branch off. For example, the battery mode, you would just have to flick a switch on and off for power. But for the crank mode, you would have to flick the switch and keep cranking the crank to produce power, and then lock it back before setting the flashlight down. And a few key takeaways we got from this chart was that having different modes needed a visual indicator, because in that initial second step where they were picking which power they wanted, we often noticed some people struggling to find which one because it wasn't labeled. But after about 5 seconds of playing with the tabs, they usually figured out which tab corresponded to which power. And we also learned that more modes within the system makes the process more complex, and that could hinder the user experience by making a flashlight super complicated. People might not want to buy it because it's not easy to use. Our next piece of research was a series of interviews from 3 candidates, and we asked them the following questions. We first asked them how would they use this flashlight. Most of them said as a normal flashlight whenever it was dark to help them see. We asked them what they liked about it. They said they really liked the crank and not having to rely on the batteries, and that portability. We asked them what they didn't like about it, and they said that it was kind of small and it wasn't tube size. They didn't like that slot geometry we talked about. They felt it was very ergonomically weak. We asked them what are some suggestions for improvements on this flashlight, and almost all of them said having one powerful flashlight rather than 2 weaker ones that are separate. We asked them what they liked about other flashlights, and interestingly, one candidate said they liked having some input into certain aspects of it, like the brightness, for example. They liked how, in say an iPhone, you could adjust the brightness. We asked them where they would store this flashlight, and they usually said a pocket or drawer, somewhere kind of in a tight space, but it was super easily accessible. And we asked them what would make this flashlight easier to use, what could maybe make it easier. Most of the time they said yes, it was easy to use, but they would benefit more from one bulb being super strong, as it would be more effective in use. A few takeaways: needed to be operated in the dark, because when they were starting out, when they would use the flashlight, it was usually in a dark spot. People liked the size of the flashlight. People liked that portable size, being able to take it anywhere. People didn't like that slot geometry. They wanted a tubular, super circular, traditional flashlight geometry profile. And almost all respondents liked a more powerful flashlight rather than 2 separate ones. And we also needed a slim profile in order to function in common storage places like a pocket or a drawer. We didn't want a big bulky flashlight to just sit in here. We wanted something small that you could just grab easily and could go anywhere. Our last piece of research was an online comparison to a flashlight model, which we thought was really nice. Here's what it looks like. A few things we noticed was it has a clip and it has a swivel head. And what that allowed the user to do was to clip it anywhere they wanted, say your shirt, and adjust where the light was and use the flashlight hands-free, which we were a really big fan of. And we also noticed that this flashlight had a really easy access port for, say, batteries. And we really liked that because in the pig flashlight, to replace the batteries, which you had to do because the crank wouldn't recharge them, you would have to first unscrew the belly, and then you would have to disassemble basically the full flashlight. And along the way, you might mess up some of the systems, and it was really complicated and honestly kind of frustrating to take that apart. And we really like this easy access battery port because it improved the user experience by a lot. Here's our initial propositions. This is my flashlight proposal. As you can see, it's ergonomically based by, as you can see, if you look at the profile of a hand, that's where this bump comes in, and these little bumps, it fits the ergonomic profile of your hands, as you can see. And it also has various features like an adjustable head and a belt clip. And this we wanted to add on this flashlight because it mimicked that other flashlight, that adjustability, and added some customizability in that design. And that adjustable head was based off of a cross section of a ball socket joint. As you can see, this piece would fit into this slot, and you could freely adjust the flashlight. And in addition to this, it was very compact. In fact, it was actually based around something rectangular like the design pack, something super rectangular but super flat because it stored really easily in the pocket. Thomas's flashlight proposal, he took a slightly different approach. Instead of using or taking advantage of a pocket centered flashlight, he really liked that tubular geometry, which everyone else seemed to really like, and he also made it super compact. Christian's flashlight took a very different approach, and rather than focusing on ergonomics, he really honed in on manufacturing ease of use and or just manufacturing ease in general. As you can see, his is just a box with 4 screws that takes the whole cover off, which makes it super easy when you're doing maintenance and just super cheap to make. We compared all our flashlight models, and my flashlight had the most points. Thomas' flashlight had the second most points with just half a point behind, and Christian's was the least voted or least popular. We actually based it off of Thomas' design, however, because while my flashlight had the most points, we liked Thomas's ergonomics, and we could actually kind of put features from my flashlight onto Thomas's flashlight, which got us every design element we wanted. So here's our final design. We have an adjustable head that's a ball socket joint, and these slots in here allow you to lock the rotation, basically limiting it to only vertical and horizontal vertical movement and no horizontal movement. We also added a clip like that other flashlight, so you could clip it onto your shirt or something and use it hands-free. And we also took advantage of that circular profile, which everyone really liked. In addition to this, we had a gearbox like the pig flashlight, which, when I say like flashlight, it's actually the same thing, but it's built inside of a more robust box so that when you do maintenance on it, it won't all fall apart, and when you're replacing the power, like the batteries, it won't fall apart either. And we also added the 3 modes to this flashlight. We added a battery powered mode, a crank powered mode, and a battery charging mode. Because what we noticed with most people is when they crank the crank, they thought it would charge the batteries, but it didn't. So we added that mode in our wiring diagram, and we used XOR gates so that the wiring, it could use the same ports from different functions, but also it was able to do various functions with the same components. And we put the wiring within the spaces of the flashlight because this spot over here takes up most of the space with the gearbox, but these other gaps allowed wiring to go through, which made it really organized and clean, and made maintenance actually a little bit easier. Thank you for listening, and we hope that this flashlight makes it to the next stage of the management process.